We're going to talk about how to pass rental property LLCs down to your kids without them having to go through the probate process and without having to use an expensive trust. If you have your rental portfolio inside of an LLC, you might be wondering, how do I make sure that my kids can actually take over the LLC and the operations inside of it? Most people assume that their family can just take over the LLC and the operations inside of it, but if you do not set up your estate plan correctly, what's going to happen is it will have to go through the probate courts. Your family will experience delays. They will have to deal with the courts and the judges for the probate process, and they will not be able to collect cash flow during the period where they may need that money the most. The good news is that you don't need a trust to avoid the probate process. You can set up your LLC to transfer ownership without giving up control over the LLC and the operations inside of it, and you can do it tax-free to avoid the probate process. Let's talk through how this whole setup works in Georgia, what the process will look like, and what will happen if you do nothing. So the first thing is, what happens if you do nothing and you leave the LLC membership interest in your personal name? When you hold the LLC membership interest in your personal name and you pass away, the membership interest will have to go through the probate courts to be able to be passed down to your family. That means your children will not be able to collect rent, make mortgage payments, or deal with the tenants like evictions or signing new lease agreements until the probate process is over. The second thing is that your spouse and kids are going to be left waiting. Even if you have a will that outlines who the executor is, who the assets are going to, it's still going to take 9 or more months for your rental properties to go through the probate process. And because you have your rental portfolio inside of an LLC, it's likely to take longer because you have a more complex estate. And if you don't set things up correctly and you distribute those assets out to your family, they could become personally liable for any tenant lawsuits or disagreements that they have with contractors, because that asset will be in their personal name, and any lawsuits that will not be covered by insurance will have to be covered by them and the personal assets that they own. So in short, if you do nothing and keep everything in your personal name, it will have to go through the probate process. It will take 1 to potentially 2 years for the assets to go through the probate process and go down to your family, for them to take over the ownership and control. And then when you distribute it out to them, they could become personally liable for any lawsuits coming after that rental portfolio. A better strategy is to have a manager manage LLC with 2 classes of ownership. One of the ways that you can make your LLC avoid the probate process is to restructure it with 2 types of ownership. The first one is going to be Class A. These are voting units, and they allow you to maintain control over the operations inside the LLC, so you'll be able to manage the tenants, manage the finances, pay the taxes, do the lease agreements, all of those things related to the operations inside the LLC. You will have full control over it. The second type of ownership would be Class B ownership, which is just voting rights. So it does not give them any control over the operations inside the LLC. They just take over partial ownership of that LLC. This step allows you to maintain control over the LLC and the operations inside of it while still passing down some of the ownership down to your kids. Think of it like driving a car. When you have the Class A ownership, you're the one driving in the driver's seat. And then when you have Class B ownership, your kids are going to be sitting in the passenger seat. Over time, you give them more and more gas money, but you're still steering the car until you let them take over control. So let's talk about how the gifting process works when you're trying to pass down LLC membership interest down to your kids. The IRS is going to let you pass down small chunks of ownership of the LLC through an annual gift exclusion. Now, we're talking about 2025 annual gift exclusions, which are going to be $19,000 per year per individual. So if you and your spouse are both gifting down assets to your children, you can do $19,000 apiece. Now, if you're watching this at a later date, the annual exclusions might be a little bit different, so just apply the current year's numbers to this particular setup. You can also use part of your lifetime exemption, which is currently $13.99 million in 2025. Again, as things change, you'll just adapt those numbers in the current year to this particular setup. What's great about this is when you pass down non-voting shares of an LLC, the professional valuation applies a discount to the shares that you're passing down to them. This is because you're not passing control when you pass these shares down to them. You're only passing down an ownership piece of the LLC, which means that you're able to pass down more value while staying within the limits. Over time, your kids will be able to accumulate full ownership of the LLC, so now that they have full ownership of the LLC, it will not have to go through the probate process because you no longer own the LLC. Now your children own that LLC. Setting this up requires more than just pushing paperwork around. You'll need to update your operating agreement. That's where we can help. We offer a free estate plan, which includes a will, the power of attorneys, and the healthcare directives for you and your family. That way you guys can get started at no cost. And then when you're ready, we can set up the LLC structures for your rental portfolio and the gifting strategy for you so that your family can avoid the probate process and take over the LLCs without having any headache. If you want to get started with a free estate plan, just click link in the bio, the description, or the comments below. So let's talk about why present interest matters when you're gifting the shares of your LLC down to your kids. For this to count as a tax-free gift, your kids must get a present interest, which means that they can benefit from the shares now, not just in the future. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to be cutting distribution checks out to them right now, but it just means that they need to have the ability to be able to take distributions from it. Meaning you cannot lock away the money in a way that makes the ownership of this LLC basically meaningless. Think of it as like gifting a key down to your kids. If it unlocks a door today, then it counts as a tax-free gift. If it only unlocks a door 5 years from now, it will not count as a tax-free gift. Now, here's something you also want to take into account. You're going to potentially lose your step up in basis. So if you gift everything now, your kids will inherit your original purchase price, which would be the basis. And so when they sell, they will be taxed on the entirety of the gains of that asset. But if they inherit the assets after you pass away, then they will receive a step up in basis. Let's say you buy a rental property for $200,000 and when you pass away, it's worth $400,000. If you gift that rental property down to your kids for the duration of your life and they go and sell that property at $400,000, they will have to pay capital gains tax on the entirety of the gains, which would be $400,000 minus the original purchase price of $200,000, leaving them with paying capital gains tax on the $200,000 gain. Now, if they inherit that rental property when you pass away at $400,000, they get a step up in basis, which means that the new basis for them is $400,000, not the original $200,000 purchase price that you had. And so if they sold it immediately at $400,000, they would not have to pay any capital gains tax because they received that step up in basis. There is a little bit of a balancing act here. So most investors are going to gift most of the LLC membership interest down to the kids through the duration of their life, but maintain a sliver of ownership for themselves. That sliver will get a step up in basis, and with a special tax election, your kids can adjust the LLC numbers to match. So now that you know how to structure all of this, let's talk about some of the things that you need to make sure that you have in place so you don't mess up this whole structure and make it basically useless. The first one's going to be the operating agreement. It needs to outline clearly who owns what, how distributions are made, and how transfers are going to be made. The second one's going to be loan documents. You need to make sure that your loans do not have a clause in there stating that there's a change of control, then the banks could call the remaining balance of the loan due. If it does, you need to talk to your lender and just make sure that you're working within the frameworks that they give you so that you can actually accomplish this. The third one's going to be insurance. You need to make sure that the LLC is covered by that insurance policy, not just you as an individual, and then you would also want to have an umbrella insurance policy as needed. The fourth one's going to be record keeping. Every gift should include a signed transfer, an updated ownership ledger, and then also a solvency statement showing that you're not trying to dodge creditors. So what does this actually look like and feel like when you have everything structured correctly and everything's put into place? When you have this set up correctly, this allows you to maintain control over the entire rental portfolio while you're alive. It allows your kids to gradually take over the ownership of the rental portfolio without any of the court's involvement through the probate process. It protects your family from any liability gaps or the messy probate process as well. And it minimizes or eliminates gift tax exposure along the way. So instead of your LLC and the rental portfolio going through the probate process and getting stuck in there for potentially 1 to 2 years, your family's just going to be able to keep running the operations and the ownership of that LLC. Everything's going to chug along smoothly. They can still manage the tenants, evict tenants as needed, make mortgage payments, manage the financiers related to it, pay the taxes, do turnover, hire contractors, etc. They can still maintain the operations without any hookups inside of it when you pass away. If you want help setting any of this up or you want the free estate plan, just click the link in the bio, fill out the form, and schedule a time to talk to someone on our team.